Hello, Malcolm here, and welcome to Tuesday Teaching Tips, episode 199, almost at 200. And today we're talking about the value of collaborative preparation for sermons, teaching, and preaching. Why it's important and how it's so helpful to us when we collaborate in the preparation phase. Now, this has come to my mind because my good friend Rob Payne sent me a link to an article called 12 Things TEDx Speakers Do That Preachers Don't. Very interesting article, and I've linked to it in the show notes, so you can have a look at the whole article there. And before you switch off, either because you think TEDx is too worldly for us to learn something from, or because you think that, well, 12 tips is too many, rest assured, I'm only going for one today. One will be enough for today. Again, you can read the whole article, but I'm just going to talk about one thing today. Now, I reviewed the article and I broadly agree with all 12 points. Some are more relevant than others depending on the context in which you're preaching and teaching, and even perhaps your own style and what works for you and your congregation rather than everybody. The principles underlying those 12 tips are all actually very important, but more on those another time. But there was one that stood out to me as I read it, not so much to see whether I agreed with it, but more to see what might there be in this article that's helpful for me. And as I looked at it, read it and thought about it, I realized there is one that I think I struggle with more than the rest, and that's the area of collaboration. Collaboration in the preparation of the sermon or the lesson or whatever it is. Now, I'm going to give you his point from the article and then make some suggestions as to how we might think about it. And I'd like to know what you think, whether you agree, and also whether you've tried collaboration and what works and perhaps what doesn't work for you. Now, his third point of his 12 is called collaborate, and it follows his list in a previous point about making a list of all the things that you might talk about for a particular topic or from a particular text. You list everything and then you refine it down to what's most necessary and needed for your particular congregation. Now, this is point 3 that comes after when he talks about making this list. Let me quote. Consider making this list with a trusted friend, someone who isn't an expert in your field. During rehearsal stage, the TEDx guide recommends listening to criticism. Calvin made it a rule for pastors in his region to collaborate on their texts before preaching. Personally, I wish we didn't see the sermon prep as a Lone Ranger event. Why not ask the perspectives of people who represent those who will be listening to this thing, believers and non-believers alike? So that's a quote from the article. So let me tease the paragraph apart and address its components, and then let's talk about what might be useful for you and I. So first of all, he talks about making a list with a friend. So there he's talking about, let's say you're going to preach on the topic of grace, or you're going to preach on Luke chapter 5, and you sit down with a friend and you say, let's list all the topics or all the significant things that we think could be said about this topic or this text. So you're sitting there with your friend, he comes up with an idea, you come up with an idea, you write everything down and you refine it down and pick only a few, because all of this would be too much. So in other words, what he's saying is that when we sit down with someone to consider all of what could be said about a topic or a text, doing it with somebody else can be very helpful to the creative process. And he specifically says, someone who's not an expert in your field. Why might that be important? Because someone who's similar in their expertise to you in a particular topic or on a particular text will likely see the text or the topic in the same way that you do. And then you've negated the whole purpose in doing something collaboratively. You need someone who thinks a bit differently, sees things a bit differently, has different experiences to you, perhaps different gifts, different application. If they have a different life situation to you, perhaps you're married and they're single, or you're older, they're younger. And which is often the case for me these days. And so then they have a very different perspective on the topic or the text. And something very creative, very catalytic in a sense in that. They bring different interests, different values, different experiences to the table. So yes, make that list with a friend. Secondly, he talks about the rehearsal stage, during the rehearsal stage. And this is a big thing for TEDx, of course. I don't tend to rehearse my sermons. I do rehearse parts of them in my own head or speaking them out loud, especially on prayer walks. I go out and pray for a while, and then I'll talk about a particular part of a sermon with God. I'll do it there with God. He's my audience in a sense. And I do find that in doing that, he refines my thinking, and I'm very grateful for that. But I wonder whether I should think about rehearsing parts of my sermon at least with someone around me. I can't do it physically with anybody other than my wife right now because of isolation. But perhaps I could pick up the phone, I could do something online with a video. I need to think about that. Perhaps you could think about that. That might be useful to collaborate in that sense of rehearsals. Then he talks about the Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger. I do wonder where it came from. The idea that preachers and teachers should prepare their lessons in isolation, almost like they're in some kind of cave somewhere. We go into our cave, prepare, and then come out and ta-da, it's all sorted and we know everything we need to say. I wonder where that began. I don't know. If you know where that perspective started, I'd be interested. Perhaps it was always that way. I think there is a balance. There's a balance here because although going away and then coming back with the completed article without there any collaboration or connection, it may not be the best. It's also the case that though, if you're going to have your own authenticity, if it's going to be your message, you yourself need to take some time privately away to study, to think, to pray, and to come up with your own ideas and your own convictions, because then they're really yours. Now, I don't believe that collaborating with people necessarily needs to negate the value of the private study. We can surely do both. So that's something to think about. How can you incorporate both that private study time and thinking and making it sure it's your own conviction, but also not being the Lone Ranger. Something to think about. And fourthly, in that paragraph, he talks about asking your listeners. What do they think about a topic or a text in advance? Could we ask more from our congregations or even people who are not members of our churches but who attend regularly? Perhaps teenagers who aren't yet Christians or long-term visitors who come regularly. What about asking them what they think about a topic, about a text, and get some perspectives from the people to whom we're going to be speaking? I think that would be rather interesting, asking them in advance. So that's those are the 4 parts of that paragraph. Some practical thoughts for myself, perhaps for you as well. Let me know what you think. Some practical thoughts. If we are going to collaborate in any meaningful sense, we are going to need to decide our text or our topic well in advance. There's no point in my deciding on Saturday what I'm going to preach on and sending out a message at 9:30 at night saying, hey everybody, what do you think about this? People are too busy. It's not going to be fair to ask them a comment at short notice, and anyway, you know, we shouldn't be doing this on Saturday. So prepare well in advance. I've spoken about this topic in other broadcasts, other messages, other podcasts and videos before this, so you can go back and look at those. But doing it well in advance will give enough time for meaningful reflection and collaboration. So that's the first thing, deciding well in advance. Secondly, broadcast widely. Broadcast widely. There are many tools we can use for soliciting a wide variety of inputs. You could record a short video talking about what you're going to talk about and post it on a Facebook page, your own or your church's, say a week ahead or even 2 weeks ahead, and say, please, give me some feedback by this date. It'd be really helpful. Stick it out there online, the topic or the text you're going to be speaking about, but broadcast widely on your website, on a Facebook page, on YouTube, via a text message to a large range of people. Spread it wide. In one sense, that's significant. But then secondly, not to contradict that, but I think also we need to broadcast narrowly. So both wide and narrow. The truth is, probably the case for you, but for me, I'm bombarded with text messages, WhatsApp messages, messenger messages, Facebook posts, emails. I mean, the list goes on, right? I'm pretty bombarded, and especially in this time of social isolation, I'm very grateful for the people who are in touch with me via social media, but there's a lot more of it. So if I receive one more message saying, what do you think about Revelation 22 verse 6? I'm preaching on it this Sunday. I'm going to need to be highly motivated to actually engage with that. And so therefore, I would suggest that rather, as well as broadcasting widely, you specifically ask individuals that you believe would have add something valuable to your preparation. So you know those friends of yours. You send them a message personally, and not saying dear all, but dear Richard, dear Pamela, dear whoever. But you give them, it's a specific person. You say, I'd really value your input. You know me, I know you think about these things. Please give me some thoughts on this passage, this topic. I know you'll have something valuable and interesting to say. So be specific about what you want, and ask the question very specifically, not too broadly like, what do you think of this passage? What do you think of this topic? Too vague. We need something more specific, and we need a because. Because is very important. Let me illustrate. In other words, don't ask, what do you think of this passage? Instead, something more like, what do you see as the most controversial part of this passage and why? Or what surprises you? Or what doesn't make sense to you? Questions that make people think. And then because. Please get back to me by Wednesday, say, specific date, because I'm doing my sermon preparation on Thursday morning. So an interesting question, followed by a deadline, followed by a because. That will get you far more responses than a generic question. So spread things widely, but also spread things narrowly, or more narrowly, contact people more narrowly, and then be specific in your questions. For me, I like the fruits of collaboration, but I must admit it's not one of my habits, especially when it comes to a standard, say, sermon. I do collaborate more when it comes to big projects. I feel the need, but with sermons, for some reason, it's not been part of my habitual lesson preparation. And I'm going to work at that for a while because it's one of my weaker areas. I'm not saying that every lesson of mine needs to be fully collaborative, but I want to make it more of a habit. And I think that will enrich the sermons and the lessons, not just for me, but for the people who end up hearing them. So that's my plan. So I sent out a message a few days ago about this coming Sunday sermon. This week I'm preaching on Psalm 122. I've messaged the Watford Church. I'm going to be putting more messages online, asking people for thoughts. I put some questions in my newsletter that I sent out from my website. And already somebody has responded. Thank you. I think it was Helen. I think it was you, Helen. Thank you very much for that. And other people have been responding. I'm very grateful for that. So I'm going to work on this. It's not so much that this is a make or break in any sense. And none of these tips perhaps are individually going to make or break a good lesson or sermon. But it's important for you and I, as we teach and preach over the years, that we add skills, we add good habits, and we continue to grow in our not only delivery, but preparation. So this is all about preparation. Is there an area for you where you could do with working on an area to improve your preparation process, your preparatory process, whatever the right phrase is? What might it be for you? Might it be collaboration? So specifically on collaboration, what I would like to know is what you think about what I've said today, and also whether you yourself have some good collaborative habits that you employ, that you found fruitful. Please tell me what they are and what the benefit is. And if you've seen other people benefit, then that's good. If you haven't tried collaboration, perhaps you could try it. Collaborate with somebody local, collaborate with someone you know who could help you with your lesson preparation. So please do me a favor and drop a comment into the comment box if you're watching the YouTube video, or on wherever you get the podcast from. There should be somewhere to leave a comment. If there isn't, then send me an email, malcolm@malcolmcox.org. And if you know anybody that might benefit, pass the link on to them. If you haven't already done so in YouTube, hit that subscribe button and the notification button, and you'll find out about more videos when they come out. If you're listening to the podcast, then do leave me a review if you don't mind, or send me an email with your review and I'll make sure it gets posted. I'll be very grateful for that. As you can see today, if you're watching the video, you might be able to hear it in the podcast. My audio surroundings are a bit different because I'm in my wife's greenhouse. And with this isolation business with my son at home, my wife at home, sometimes it's hard to find the right time and space to record. So today we are in the greenhouse. I hope you've enjoyed this visit to my wife's wonderful greenhouse, and I hope that you enjoy collaborating and the fruits of collaborative sermon preparation. And until the next time, Take care and God bless.